Welcome to the Concert Queen Connect. I'm really excited. I'm kind of fangirling right now. I think my hands are sweating in like a fangirl way. I have Miss Ruby Jane Smith. Ruby Jane, Ruby. We'll talk about all the different names.
All the names.
So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy
honored to be here. I'm excited.
Y'all, I'm so excited. So I'm so happy to have you here. I met you through our mutual friend, Jack Gallagher, who was actually my first guest. So shout out, Jack. We love you.
Jack is the best.
We love you. But he's the one who was like, hey, I don't know if you're familiar with this artist, but I think she'd be like a great person to have. This is right when it was first starting this whole podcast. I was like, oh, tell me more about her. And so he was like, oh, she was like the violinist for Willie Nelson, starts going down your whole rap sheet, which we'll get into. And he's like, I think she'd be great. And so I remember we like connected and then, kind of crossed paths. And then I saw you dressed up as Cruella DeVille at Love and Light. I think Steve might have Halloween. Love and Light. No, he wasn't there.
I love that you say Cruella DeVille because
I don't know
who I was. But what happened was I'm horrible at Halloween, and Mount Joy asked me to do that show with them, and I was like, shit, like I have to dress up as something. And so I started like looking up. I don't know how I landed here, but I found an Amazon sad French clown costume, which was like, the black and white, like, I don't know what they're called. You know what I'm talking about. The Miami clown, Perot clown. I don't know. Anyway, so that was my dress. But then
I don't know. I just I butchered
that night guessed that that's what I was. But then I had the wig because I was like, I'll go all black and white. So the two things that I got were Cruella DeVille and Moira from Schitt's Creek. And so at the end of the night, I was just like, I'm Moira from Schitt's Creek. I was like, I don't know what I am. I
had no idea. Yeah. I just thought that's like literally my head is Cruella DeVille.
It was really just not a costume that was well put together. So everyone just made their own observations, and I was fine with it. I was like, at least I'm dressed up in something.
But then you were up there with Matt, and that's where I was like, oh my God, that's Ruby Jane. Like that's who I connected with, and I saw you up there and. Mount Joy, amazing, but they were all dressed up as like the Sesame Street characters. And then you had what's the keyboardist name? Jackie dressed up as Oscar the Grouch.
Yes, it was so good. But
she had this giant like garb. I want to talk to her about wearing
her head piece that kept falling off. I was cracking. It
just kept falling down, and she was like adjusting her like.
I kept wanting to say like, just take it off, just take it off.
She was committed to it.
Yeah.
She was committed to it. And you went on there. So let's take it back to just some background on you. And so we were kind of talking beforehand. And Steve was like, oh, like, how long have you been doing music? And I'm like, 2 years old. So like, really, though, like, how did you get started in music? And even as early as 2?
Yeah, so it's kind of a strange story. But I grew up in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a house with my mom and my grandparents. My mom was a single mom, and we moved to Mississippi. I was born in Dallas. We moved to Mississippi when I was 2 days old. My mom was just like, I'm going back home with my family. And so we moved back home, and I grew up in the house with the 3 of them. And my mom is like very eclectic. I love my mother. We're very close. She's like very eclectic and very like kind of hippy dippy. And so she had this rule growing up that I was not allowed to watch TV. So I didn't really we had Friday night movie night, one night a week. I could pick a movie, but otherwise I grew up with no TV, no video games, nothing like that.
Wow.
And so instead, if she, for whatever reason, had to leave the house and my grandparents weren't there and it was just like a babysitter, she'd be like, whatever you do, don't put the TV on. If you have to go take a call from your boyfriend or whatever, you can put on this VHS. I'm dating myself now. You can put on this VHS of Isaac Perlman and Pinka Zuckerman, which are like a famous classical violinist and viola player. And so, of course, inevitably, the babysitter would put on whatever she would let me put on. So I ended up watching hours and hours and hours of this violinist when I was goodness. 2. And so then, sure enough, I was very precocious. And when I was about 2.5, I asked my mom for a violin. And so she got me this like little toy FAO Schwartz violin, and I started like there's like home videos of me like yanking the strings and like, you know, not knowing anything that I'm doing, but just like trying to make music with it. And she put me in lessons. I started taking classical violin lessons at like 2.5. And normally with this like specific classical program, they wouldn't take you till you were 5. But the teacher was like, I'll just meet with her and see. And so she met with me and she was like, well, I think she's focused enough to start. So I started and I just fell in love with the instrument and was, you know, playing violin constantly till I was like 7 or 8. And then I decided, you know, I want to play the violin, but I don't want to do classical anymore. Like I want to play fiddle music. I want to do some, you know, and even at that age, at like 8, you know, I was like, I want to play on the stage. I want to, you know, this is what I want to do.
That is so, okay. So let's pause there for a second.
Yeah, sorry, I'll take you through every year.
When I was 8 years old, I was like chasing my shadow on a wall.
Yeah.
Like
I did that
not,
too, though.
You know what I mean?
Too.
Like
yeah.
I was not like, let me think. How old are you when you're 8? Like what? 3rd, 2nd grade? 1st, 2nd grade? I don't know. I was maybe jumping over like cones in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Like I was not thinking like, oh, hey, I'm going to be on this stage, you know, or just dancing. So I just find that so fascinating. Like I was telling you earlier, just to know like at that young of an age, like you can already kind of see like this is where I want to be and this is what I want to do. So tell us about that.
Man, well, it's hard to remember all the thoughts that went through my head at 8, but I know that I just had such a love for music. And I would try like writing songs, and I would even have like when my friends would come over, I would make them be in my band and I would like write the music for the band. I just loved it so much.
That's so cool.
And so I was just, I just consider myself very lucky. And I realize that like not a lot of people are that lucky to know that young, and not only that, but to stick with it and not change their mind, which is it's never been like a question for me. It's never been, oh, I don't know if I want to do music. Music is like 80% of my DNA. You know, I don't know who I would be without music. You know, it is who I am. And so that was never a question, which is like I obviously recognize is very rare, and so I feel very blessed in that. But yeah, I fell in love with it. And so around like 8 years old is when I asked to take fiddle lessons. So I started doing that. And then what I started doing was competing. So
tell us about fiddle too. Like what exactly defined that versus just like your classic violin? Like what's the difference in those?
Sure. So fiddle and violin are actually the same instrument.
Okay.
There's 2 different names for whatever reason. And there was actually, when I was like 13 and I moved to Austin, I went on KUT before it was KUTX, and I did an interview, and they asked me the difference between a violin and a fiddle. And I was like so cheesy when I was younger. And so I told them this joke, which is that a violin has strings and a fiddle's got strings. And I kid you not, they still air it on KUTX. I have still to this day had people call me and be like, I'm pretty sure I just heard your 13-year-old voice make a really cheesy joke about the difference between a fiddle and a violin. And I was like,
that's so cute.
I cannot believe that is still a thing. That's something I wish would go away forever, because I might sound like such a little like goober. Yeah. But yeah, so there's tons of jokes about it, but it's the same thing, same instrument. Violin is more targeted towards like classical, jazz, that kind of stuff. Fiddle is like country, bluegrass, swing. I usually now say violin just because I do pop music, and I guess in pop you would call it violin. But I play everything, so sometimes I call it a fiddle, sometimes I call it a violin. But at that age, you know, I wanted to do fiddle music, so I wanted to do like bluegrass, especially like that was super prevalent in Mississippi. Bluegrass festivals were everywhere, so I wanted to do bluegrass music. I wanted to play fiddle tunes. And I started competing, and this is a super Southern thing. They have a ton of them in Texas, actually, but they're called fiddle contests. And so literally you like learn a set of 3 songs that are fiddle tunes, right? And you go up on stage and you perform them, and then, you know, you compete and judges judge you. And it is exactly what it sounds like. So I started doing fiddle contests, and I entered in my first one when I was 8 after 6 fiddle lessons, and I won first place. And after that, it was game over. Like, I already knew what I wanted to do, but I remember, like, I got a standing ovation, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, look at this, like, 8-year-old girl that can, like, really play. And so after that, I was hooked. You know, it was like I was addicted to it. And I, you know, I never went to school. So I was always homeschooled from a young age. And so that was already not an issue. And so my mom was like, well, let's like travel around to these fiddle contests and let's see what happens. You know, like I said, like she's very eclectic. And I really do like credit my mom to so much of my success, because if I had one of those parents that was like a stickler and was like, no, you have to stay in school and you might like music, but you can pursue it in college or whatever, I wouldn't have the life that I have today. So I credit so much of my entire life to my mom. But yeah, so she just supported me 100% and took me traveling to these different places and playing fiddle contests. And from there, it turned into like real shows. And I started like singing and really writing when I was about 11. And recorded my first album in Mississippi when I was like 11. And yeah, just from there, it kind of grew and grew.
Yeah, I saw your music video.
Oh gosh,
on
one?
YouTube when you're 11.
Oh,
there's a music video which we're gonna put in.
Oh my gosh!
But it's so, because you just, I mean, you're 11 and you're a boss. You're like directing traffic and like telling people, right? Like you're in the middle of a field, kind of too, right?
Yeah. Is it the I don't love nobody thing? Am I in a car?
You were out
in a convertible, like.
I mean, yeah. But well, the fact that you even have this many music videos at the age of 11.
I'm wondering which. Well, so there's actually one from when I was 9.
Or maybe it's not. Okay.
And I'm wondering if that's
it might be that one where you're.
But I was like in a car in a cotton field in Mississippi.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
But I was definitely like very precocious, and just very. I've always had an old soul, I guess, and so just. I always hung out with adults, and I think that probably matured me faster than most people. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't necessarily feel like I missed out on a childhood, but I just had a different kind of childhood. And I was constantly working with adult musicians. And so I grew up a little bit faster and had a little bit more of a command of what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That grew like very quickly from that young age, for sure.
So when you did come across like, I guess kids, because you hear that too with like child stars, and like you said, you said like, you know, you didn't feel like you grew up too fast or you grew up differently.
Yeah.
But like when you would come across kids your age, like, you know, how is that like those conversations too? Because it's like you're doing all these things.
Yeah.
So I could imagine it'd be.
I definitely
different.
Felt so awkward around kids my own age for a long time. And I felt just so much more comfortable around adults.
Yeah.
And I definitely had like childhood friends that I grew up with in Mississippi, and some of them are still my friends to this day. And I always just had like a very like mixed group of friends. You know, I had friends from my childhood in Mississippi. I had other like fiddle contest kids that were my friends. And then, you know, when I moved to Austin, I had some other friends that were homeschooled as well. And so I met my friends in a lot of different ways, but I didn't have like a whole lot of friends. I didn't grow up in like going to a school where you're just thrown into the mix with all these kids your own age. And so I lived just a different kind of life, you know, like most of the time I would hang out with my friends every once in a while. I'd have a few close friends, but then otherwise I'd be working and, you know, I'd be doing like my schoolwork. And then after that, I'd be doing a show or I'd be traveling. And then like, as I got older, I'd be like going on tours and stuff like that. So I remember like when I was a teenager, I had like a little bit of resentment that I didn't like go to school and I didn't like have all these friends that were my own age. But now looking back, I'm just like so grateful. I don't know how I would have been in school. I feel like I would have been like super dorky and probably like had a really bad experience. I don't know. I don't know how I would have been. Yeah. But I'm like, now I definitely consider myself like very lucky to have had those experiences versus just like a typical school
like
life.
a little girl chasing her shadow, you know, like doing all these different
I
things.
did all that stuff too.
No, I'm just kidding. But but all those experiences, and like you said, you're going around, you're traveling around, you're doing these fiddle contests. Then how did that eventually transition? Like, was it word of mouth? Because, you know, you played with I'm going to name some names here, y'all, of people she's played with. Willie Nelson, Asleep at the Wheel, Marty Stewart, Lady Gaga, Wu-Tang Clan, ZZ Top, Sheryl Crow. I Saw Your Blues Traveler. I mean, all of these names. So how was it like you got one big break and then they all kind of started piling in after that, or was it kind of sporadic?
Just sporadic, honestly. I mean, when all of that started, my big, I guess, experience that I had prior to moving to Austin was when I was about 9, I was invited to play the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville, which is like
the youngest,
you're in country music, that's like the big stage. That's like the Carnegie Hall. That's that's the big deal, the Madison Square Garden of like country stuff. And at that time, I was the youngest person to ever be invited. And so that kind of put me on the radar of some people. But I mean, that I was 9 at that time. And then I played again when I was 11. But I didn't move to Austin until I was 13. And so after I got here, I was playing a show out. Can't remember, it's not there anymore. Art's Rib House, which was like this little like hole in the wall rib joint, and I was doing a jam session there, and who happened to walk in but Ray Benson of Asleep at the Wheel.
Oh wow. And
totally unplanned. He walked in, saw me play, and kind of like walked up to me after and was like, hey, like, you're really good. Would you want to like come to my studio and maybe play a little bit and just see how it goes? And so, of course, I said yes. And I then started to kind of perform with Asleep at the Wheel. I did a musical for a long time that they had that was written by Ray Benson and a couple of other writers from LA, but it's based on the life of Bob Wills, who's like the founder of Western swing music. And it's a musical about his life, and it travels around the country. It doesn't exist anymore, sadly. I love that whole cast. But I joined their musical. I played the young Bob Wills. They had me in like a wig and overalls and made me look like a little boy. Yeah, it was amazing. It was my only acting, really, and it wasn't even acting. But yeah, so I did that, and then over the next year or two, Ray and Willie are best friends. So Willie would come around, and Willie happened to see me play, asked me to join a tour with him, and then so that kind of snowballed from there. But a lot of the experiences have just been like random. Like Blues Traveler was literally, I was actually managed by C3 for a long time, by Amy Corbin at C3. And so then this was when I was like, I want to say 15, 16, around that time. And so they were obviously host ACL Festival. And so I was like this young little client of theirs. And so they were like, let's throw her up with like as many people as will say yes. And so they asked John Popper, and they like showed him some videos of me, and he was like, hell yeah, like I'll let this little girl come on stage. Oh my gosh. And so, I literally like met him on the tour bus an hour before, went up there and played with him. And then I think I also played with local natives, met them like an hour before. Went up. Yeah, everyone was just so kind. And so, I credit that to like my management at the time, and to people like John Popper being, open-minded enough to let this like little girl, that they've never really heard play, just come up and play. And so, so a lot of them have been just little one-off circumstances like that. And then, like Lady Gaga was actually super random, was referred to by, do you know who Max Frost is?
Oh yeah. We we have a Max Frost. That was our last episode.
Did he come on?
Or we have a super fan. My friend Max, you're in this episode as well. We talked about him. And my friend did Love and Light Stream, like Max Frost did Love and Light Stream.
Oh yeah.
And so we had gone to his show, and my friend was a super fan and like disappeared. And this was like during COVID times, and he ended up like running up to the stage and was like singing with.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute.
It was great, but that's why we both laughed, because we're like, oh, Max Frost. And and I saw that he saw it, like he watched this the clips. I was like, okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah.
So Max actually was in my band
really?
back in the day. Yeah. From at that time I was 16, from 16 to 18. And he's 2 years older than me, so he was like 18 to 20. We did like, we wrote music together, we did duo shows together. We were like a musical
wow, I bet that was really fun to watch.
Bit. Yeah, it was great. And then, you know, he went off and did his thing. But actually he's the connection to Lady Gaga because a friend of his, and I cannot remember his name. A friend of his is a horn player and plays for like Zac Brown Band, a bunch of people, but has also played for Lady Gaga, and was like, hey, you know, she's coming to Austin for South by Southwest. She wants a fiddle player. And Max was like, let me call Ruby.
I got the person.
Yeah. So he called me, and I hadn't talked to him in like a year or two. So I'm like at South by Southwest, and I see my phone ringing. I'm like, Max Frost. I'm like, that's random. Okay, hello. And he was like, hey, like, don't freak out, but I have to tell you something. And I was like, what? And he was like, Lady Gaga is in town, and she wants you to play fiddle with her. And I literally thought, because he's that type of person too, I was like, you're messing with me. Like, you're pranking me. This is a joke, right? Ha, 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 ha. Very funny. And he's like, no, I'm serious. He's like, I'm going to send you the info. You need to meet her at rehearsal tomorrow. And so I was like, okay. And I like drive out, and the rehearsal's like kind of at this theater in the middle of nowhere. And like, as I'm driving there at like 9 a.m., I'm like, if I show up and nobody's there, and this was like him like pulling one over on me, I was like, I'm going to be really fucking upset. So, but it was not.
Right.
And I ended up like playing with her for her big like South by show. And then she brought me on to do, whenever she would do like her country, you know, because had her little country face. She had her country moment, face. And so then she would ask me to like come play fiddle with her. So that was, you know, just random like little connections here and there that have brought me to all these like incredible people. And I still like can't believe it sometimes when I think about it. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, how did I do that? You know, but I have just loved like I've never had a bad experience with an artist that I've played with ever.
That's awesome.
Everyone has just always been like so kind to me, from like the Willie family being like father figures to me, his band, and Lady Gaga, like so kind and gracious, and just everyone's been great.
Yeah,
you know.
I have to ask about Wu-Tang, because I was
about to actually say
big Wu-Tang fan. So.
Yeah, I was about to actually say the only.
Oh no!
No.
Like, don't break my heart.
No, they were super sweet, but they were really hesitant at first. So how that story happened? That was another South by Southwest.
Yeah, there's a lot of violin in their songs. Yes.
So they have another South by experience. They were in Austin for South by, and another friend of mine who is a manager at C3 reached out to me, and he works a lot with Wu-Tang Clan and like Thievery Corporation. Thievery Corporation and Wu-Tang were supposed to do a show together at the Moody Theater at ACL Live. And apparently like he sent me just a message, and he was like, I think we want to bring you up to play with both of them. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
I responded as quickly as I could. And then the day of the show, I can't even remember what happened, but for whatever reason, Thievery and Wu-Tang weren't going to collaborate anymore on the show, at the show. And so he was like, I don't know, it may not happen. And I was like, okay, like I understand. And then he was like, well, let me just talk to Wu-Tang and like just see if they still want to have you. And so I had my fingers crossed. And luckily they said yes. But I mean, I'm this like little white girl, and I'm like walking in with my fiddle, and I was like,
with Wu-Tang. I love
Wu-Tang, and their whole crew, and they've got
their
like
squad.
Yes,
they're a huge squad.
I don't like super fit into the squad.
I don't know what you're. I have no idea what you're talking about, Ruby.
I stand out just a little bit, And so I like walking with my fiddle, and I like get introduced to all the guys, and I was like, "Hi, like I'm playing fiddle with you tonight," and they're like, "Okay, cool." And then you could tell that they were like, who is this? Like that maybe they were told beforehand, like you're gonna have a violinist on your thing, but they weren't like expecting like a 24-year-old little girl, like with not that I was like little, but just my like bubbly person, you know, they were just kind of like, okay, cool, hope she's good, like, you know, that type of vibe.
Yeah.
And And that's like all that I spoke to them until the show. And actually Erykah Badu was there that night.
Oh,
and
love her.
She is one of my like all-time heroes. I love Erykah Badu. And so I was really hoping we were going to be, because she was featuring, her vocals were being featured on one of their songs that night as well. And I was like, I swear, if I am up there the moment she's up there, that was like the biggest fangirl moment I think I've ever had, because I've been obsessed with her for so long. And we were not, but she was on the song right before me. So like we were at the back of the stage she was standing right in front of me, and I'm just like standing there with my violin, and I was like freaking out. And I finally like got out the courage to like tap her on the shoulder and be like, hi, just introduce myself. And she was super nice. But she went up and did like the song before me, and then I came up. I could even tell when I walked up onto the stage that the guys were like, all right, let's see what's gonna happen. Because I mean, I get it. I would be the same way,
right? So I'm curious. So
yeah,
like all these different artists that you're going up there, like you said, with the exception of like Lady Gaga, all these people are like, yeah, she can come on. Yeah, she can come on. Like, what is it that you freestyle? Like, how does that work? Because I don't, for people that aren't familiar with, that particular instrument, like, are you playing or like from ear? Do you kind of know what you're gonna play? Like, how does that
That
work?
all is just subject to the situation. So it could change. So for instance, like, for instance, John Popper, Blues Traveler, it was literally like, just come up and we're just going to jam. So that was all, just improvised soloing back and forth. With like local natives, I had a specific track I had to listen to and learn the parts for.
Got it.
With Lady Gaga, I had a specific song that I had to learn, but then I got to rehearsal, and we were in like an 8-hour rehearsal.
Oh my goodness.
So that was not like, oh, let's just throw up on stage. That was like, this is very planned. So I went there, and then like, we did a few different songs, and I made sure I knew the parts, and like I had a solo, and which would all be like improvised on the spot, but I knew what was happening. With Wu-Tang, I just played on one song. It's there. I think it's called like Reunited or something. It's the song that like really features the violin.
Yeah. That do.
Yeah. So I was sent the track the day of and like learned this basically. And then you'll have like a little wiggle room for improv or whatever, but you have to learn this line, so that was that circumstance. So I went up there, I played the line, I had like a little moment, and then afterwards they were like super cool. They were like really cool. They were like, okay, you're good. You're cool. Yeah. I was like, oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. They're like, hit this blunt.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. We heard you play with Willie.
Yeah.
But they were super cool after, and it just really like, it depends on the moment. And what I love the most is improvising on stage and soloing and doing all that kind of stuff. So with a lot of these artists, luckily, they just kind of let me like, don't keep me on like a short leash and just let me
do your thing.
Do my thing. Yeah. Which is so much fun. And I think we were talking about like before how you said you feel like you like black out when you're doing your thing.
I black out doing this, guys, not just in life. Okay. Like I don't just black I don't have just like random.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know how you just black out?
I just black out every Friday night. No. That's not what we were talking about. I told her that in the con. No, you're fine.
I should have phrased that better.
No, you're fine. I think the biggest mishap still goes to Kalu, who like said my street name on camera, which was great.
Oh my gosh.
No, you're fine. No, we were talking because I told her, I was like, I'm so hyper present when we're here and I'm talking, and I'm just like completely forget like what we talk about. But no, I think that's what you said, when you're improvising, you're doing all those things. I think.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you what I'm thinking about.
Because you're so in the zone. And it's probably like such a natural thing too at that point, because you've done it so many times.
It definitely is. It's like improvising for me, it's not something that every musician does. And certain people enjoy it more or are more inclined to it than others. But for me, it's my favorite. And I just, I couldn't tell you like what I think about. I couldn't tell you like, I can't really remember what I did. It just, it's literally like a blackout of just fly into like this zone. And then when you're done, you're like, I guess I'm done. Okay. You know what I mean? Like you're just not, But it's a beautiful thing. And it's, to me, when you're able to like channel your most creative self is like the best aspect of life, right? Because that's the moment that you're like most in tune with the universe, in tune with God, in tune with whatever spiritual thing you feel connected to. Like when you're in a creative space and you're just creating out of thin air, like to me that's when you're most like connected with the universe. And so like I feel I think that's why I relish those moments so much, you know, because and then afterwards I don't remember it because I feel like I was in like another realm or another dimension.
Yeah, you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you completely, because I feel like that's when you have that creative space. And that's what I think too, like people forget, because you have all these distractions. You know, people have anxiety about different things. And it's like, no, if you can just kind of be present and be in that moment, then you're able to have those. I feel like the sky's the limit when you can be in that creative, especially like for creatives and for artists. And that's kind of what I think, if anybody, that the common theme, like when people are here, is that, you know, they say too, like they're on stage, but they just go to another world. And they're able to do that, versus like the typical person who's not used to that. If they're up on stage like you are at ECL in front of 20,000 people, they're having, you know, maybe they're freaking out. The average person is going to like have that little bit of stage fright. Whereas for you, like you said, you're already going into another dimension.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with that. And I feel like a lot of creatives in general, whether it's musician or painter, whatever it is, I feel like we're kind of the most fucked up a little bit. Like, I mean, everyone's got their issues, right? But we're I guess we're just very emotionally vulnerable, and we're very in tune to our emotional side. And so we are, a lot of times those creative outlets are the way that we stay sane, you know? And like I myself, like almost everyone, I feel like, especially in the creative world, suffers from some kind of mental, you know, thing. And I feel like it's such a stigma that people don't talk about it. But like for me, I suffer very highly from anxiety. Very highly. And
really?
I'm a lot better now than I have been in the past, but I had a period of a couple years where like it was almost like overwhelming, you know, and just anxious about everything in life, but almost in a debilitating way. And the only time that I didn't feel anxious and I didn't even think about my anxiety was when I was creating music, you know.
Really?
Because
wow,
I was able to detach from, I was able to get out of my head, because, you know, so much of anxiety is you're wrapped up in your thoughts. And when you're in touch with your creative side, that's when you are detached from your thoughts, and instead you're tuned into your soul and into those other parts of you that are really your true self, right? Because we're really not our thoughts. Our thoughts are just you know, something that we create and that we let control us. And so when you're creative, you're able to cut that off, and you're able to just be in tune with who you really are. And that I think that's like the reason that, you know, musicians stick with music, and that's why like they love it so much, because they are so in touch, whether they want to be or not, with their emotional and vulnerable side. And that's like they call it like the escape, but to me it's like more the remedy to it than anything else. And so I think that's why like music is such a beautiful thing. Like I think it's when you like get the closest to like you know, the other realms and like the parts of us that are like really our souls and our true natures, you know, is when we were able to access that.
And that's been like, because we've talked about that, it's been like a common theme, especially in this show, and just from having the different artists, is mental health. You know, we talk about it. I think it's come up almost every show with every artist, I think. Yeah, like we talk about it, and it's important. Like we've talked about Sims and you know, Ham, and just these different organizations that, you know, Curtis Roush was here and was talking about how he went to band therapy. You know, that he's like, what other super interesting. We'd never even heard of that, you know, and they had things like that, and even, you know, Kalu, and just all the different artists that they do have these outlets, but like you said, they're hypersensitive to, like you said, I think because you are channeling something different when you're singing, and that's not something that's normal to like the average person. But what would you say has been some things that you've done for yourself to like, to the, you know, someone that's maybe seeing you for the first time or has been a big fan of you for a long time would probably never guess that you had anxiety. So what are some things that you did for yourself to really kind of help push you past that and ground you and do those things besides music?
That's a good question. I mean, I have had anxiety on and off my whole life. But I really had kind of like a trigger point a few years ago where it got like really out of hand. And what happened was, well, I'll preface it with this. About 15 years ago, my grandfather, who is my favorite person in the entire world, I have a tattoo with his handwriting on me. And he's still alive right now to this day. Like he didn't pass away, but he had a heart attack. And I think at the time I was like maybe 10 or 11. And it's the closest they thought he wouldn't make it. And it's the closest I ever got to losing someone that I loved more than anybody. And I think I kind of like just pushed it down at the time, dealt with it the way a 10-year-old would deal with it. And I started to have anxiety a little bit after that. But it was manageable, and it kind of went away a lot in my teenage years, or it manifested itself in different ways, but not in a way that was like unmanageable. And then a few years ago, the guy that I was dating at the time, his father had a heart attack and made it and is still alive. But I remember we got the call like in the middle of the night, and, he thought his father was going to pass away. And that, for whatever reason, triggered my anxiety again. And I didn't even realize it in the time when it happened. But after that, I started having like really major anxiety attacks. And it was like all this stuff that I had pushed down from the past just kind of flew up. And so I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And which a lot of people have and don't even realize it. But mine got like really severe. And I was always afraid that I was going to have a heart attack. So it was just, I was afraid of what had been happening to my loved ones, even though, at the time I was 24 and healthy. I even went to see doctors. I got EKGs. I got myself checked out, and they were like, you're not going to have a heart attack. But it would just, there would be times when like I would wake up in the morning and like I would cancel all my plans because I couldn't handle going outside. It was bad. And I kind of let it escalate for a long time, and I thought maybe I could just push past it. But, aside from like having those cathartic musical moments, I think what really just helped me was like I got into a lot of meditation, and I started like really trying to be practiced in that. And I listened to like this really good anxiety podcast. I think it's literally called like the Anxiety Podcast. I can't remember the name of it.
That's clever.
Yeah, right.
Well done, folks. Well done.
But I would listen to that stuff all the time to try to calm myself down. And to be honest, like eventually I got on anxiety medication, and it really flipped the tables for me. And I was on it for like a year and a half. And then I felt strong enough to not be on it anymore. I haven't been on it for like a year now. And I feel like I have techniques for coping with my anxiety, and now for realizing like, this is not happening to you. This is just in your mind. And again, like what I was talking about earlier about like so much of what defines us is our thoughts, when they shouldn't define us, and they shouldn't control us. Our thoughts should be something that we can control and choose to let in or not. But a lot of us don't have the tools to do that. And so I've been actually like recently studying that a lot more, and like trying to, I think not only as a coping strategy for anxiety, but just for in general in life, is like those difficult thoughts, and whether they be anxiety driven or depression or just whatever it is that is negative, is not us. It's not who we are. It's this like, I call it a pain body, but it's like it's a whole other body that is, or a whole other creature that is almost like taking over our thoughts, and it isn't us. And so learning to, I'm sorry, I'm getting like really
no, don't apologize. No, this is great. This is fantastic.
But to me, learning how to control that and how to know that like this is not you, was something that was like really helpful for me. And so those are tools that I still use to this day. But I think, if I didn't have music, I think I don't know how I would have dealt with my anxiety. I mean, I think I eventually would have come to a point where I would have been able to deal with it. But like I said, the only time that I really felt like I was in control of myself again is when I was making music. And, it's an amazing thing. Like when I'm in a studio and I'm writing a song with somebody, or I'm even just writing a song at home with myself, like I can't help but tune out every other thought. You can't help but just zone into what you're doing, and like hours can go by and I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about having a heart attack in like 3 hours, you know, or whatever it is. Like I am totally in the moment and totally living in the present. And music is like the main thing that does that for me, you know, and I think for a lot of people too.
Well, and I think, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
I do know that that's going to help someone out there that, you know, like you said, that they may not know what to do for that, or they're suffering from anxiety. And I think there's like multiple things that you touched on. Cause I think even at that age when that first happened to you, and something that I recently had like a revelation, I've been doing a lot of self work on myself and things that were causing maybe just from old traumas that maybe I didn't realize. But it's crazy because like you said, at that age when you're 9 and 10, you're doing the best that you can. You're doing what you know how to deal with it, which is the fact that you don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
And that's something like I had this revelation, like I was constantly, you know, I can say this because I actually talked to my dad about it because I had this whole thing about disappointing my dad. Like after I played basketball, like growing up, and I would see him in the stands, and I was always like, I had anxiety from like disappointing him. Right. And I always felt like I was like never good enough and all these things. And I finally like confronted my dad about it after all these years, you know, and my dad was like, those reactions were never at you. He's like, they were always at like your coach and the decisions. And I was always so proud of you. But it's like when you're in that realm and that's your only, like, I didn't know how to deal with those things. I didn't know how to communicate when I was that age. So it's very, you know, like I said, when you're that age and you're going through those things and you're processing anxiety and you're processing these emotions, you don't know how. So it's like, I almost wish that they would teach those types of things. And I know they're doing like meditation and all those things. And it's so interesting. Another thing that you touched on was, you know, because you are using a whole different part of your brain. Like back when I was doing medical sales, I actually volunteered, and there's a place here in Austin that, you know, they treat patients, all these patients, like elderly patients that have, you know, Parkinson's and different things. And I would go around the nursing homes and you'd give them like, each one would have their own instrument. And like you'd sit there and just play different things, but you would just see them come alive. Yeah. Because they're using a different part of their brain. So like you said, it's music therapy. Yes. Essentially. So it's like you're having your own musical therapy session with yourself and being able to, because it is so easy to compartmentalize things when you're going through it. And so I think kudos to you to even like recognize that when you're going through it, like, hey, this is my release, and it's a positive release. Because a lot of people, we know they go the other direction and they start using substances, and you can go that realm and food or another vice. But the fact that you were like, no, I'm going to go towards music and towards the, you know, the bright side, no, I agree with that 100%. And it's, you know, it's hard that like, you know, a lot of things that happen to us as children, we don't really ever fully process until we're older. And then all of a sudden it'll like rear its head. And then it's like, wait a second, I didn't even realize that was something that I needed to deal with, you know? But I agree like what you're saying about music being so therapeutic. And I believe that like, you know, music is absolutely something that should be vital to like children. I think every child should learn a musical instrument, you know, and I think that anyone that's dealing with trauma should have some outlet in the arts, you know, if it's music, if it's painting, if it's, because it uses a whole different part of your brain. And I think it heals you in a really healthy way. And I think also if you learn, especially in music, not only is it really helpful for brain development as children, because you're learning patterns, when you're learning to read music, you're almost learning a whole other language, but you're learning how to express yourself in a way that you don't really express yourself in regular life. You know, it's its own little like entity. And I think that a lot of times, like if we could get, you know, an instrument into every child's hands, I think it would just benefit society so much, you know, and that's obviously easier said than done, but I'm 100% an advocate for that. Like, I think everyone, even adults, you know, I think even adults should learn a musical instrument because it's, you know, it's just a great creative outlet. And it's almost like a brain exercise too. It keeps you really healthy mentally, I think. Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And so Thanks. You're playing violin, and then when did you start to transition into other instruments that you started playing? Well, yeah, violin has always been my main thing. I started playing guitar when I was maybe like 8 or 9. And I'm not great at any instrument except for the violin. But I'm decent. So I'm a decent guitar player. You're better than 95% of the people that don't know, but I think you're still good.
Thank you. I can get by on the guitar, and piano I've just played on and off over the years. And then mandolin is the other one that I would say I'm better than good at, because it's very similar to a violin, so it's like strung the same, has the same strings, but you pick it like a guitar. So that's and I just kind of sprinkled those in over the years. Like I said, my main focus has always been violin, and then singing and writing, and that's where I really feel like my strengths lie.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, like how you transitioned into singing and writing, because before, like you said, you're going up and you're doing all these things, and I feel like that could have been a very easy trajectory. Not easy because you earned it and you had all this success doing that, but it would have been very easy to just stay in that trajectory. So what was it like? How did you start transitioning into songwriting and singing?
I always feel like I've had the mindset, and I don't know if this was just like instilled in me at a young age or if it's just the way that it's just in my DNA, but I've always just wanted more. And so I achieved the whole like sideman fiddle thing at a young age, and it was like, okay, like what's next? What more can I do? I don't want to, I'm doing this now at 14. I don't want to do this only, and I've always wanted to be, I do enjoy attention.
I was about to say, sideman fiddle ain't a bad title either.
No, it's not. It's definitely not. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
But from a young age, I like being the center of the show, and so it's like, how do I go from being a sideman to being the one running the show?
Awesome.
And aside from just like, how do I do that? It was like, oh, well, I also happen to love writing music, and I also happen to love singing. And so, oh, wow, those can all work together in one. I was writing and singing from a young age, but I was primarily just known as a fiddle player. And that was kind of a difficult journey for me because I am not a born singer. I was not one of those kids that was just like born with a great voice, or teenagers that was born. I had to work my ass off to learn how to sing. And I enjoyed singing, but like I cannot tell you how many people, and like important people too in the music business, told me like, you will never be a singer. You should just play fiddle.
Wow.
And so that was something that I didn't let it deter me. I was like, well, fuck you. I'm going to learn how to sing, and I'm going to be good at it. And so that was kind of a long journey for me. And I kind of really started like taking vocal lessons and practicing my voice when I was like 13, 14. And that was also around the time that my voice started to change and develop. But that was when I was like, I'm going to focus 100% of my energy, when I'm able to, on singing and on writing and on becoming the front man that I want to be. And so, yeah, it was a long journey for me. And also, not only the singing aspect of it, but the genre part of it has been a very long journey.
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I feel like that was probably one of the most surprising kind of discoveries that I had about you, because when I met you, you were still kind of like a different sound as well.
Yeah.
And so then how did you transition over into, what would you call it now?
I put it under the pop umbrella, like electro
pop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that was, it took a long time for me to get to where I am now musically. As I said, like I've played all these different genres, but as I got older, and I expressed basically wanting to explore different sounds. And I had some supporters, and I had a lot of people that were like, nah, like you play the fiddle, you should play country music. And I was like, I don't want to play country music. Like, yeah. I've always had the dream of using the violin in an unexpected and innovative way, and being able to use it with the music that I want to make. And I have always loved pop music. Ever since I was a kid, I remember like I'd be in the car listening to songs about Jane, Maroon 5, and my mom would be like, "What are you listening to?" And I'm like, "Listen, it's like," and that's even pop rock, but like, yeah. I love pop. I just love pop music. I live for pop music. Like good pop melodies are to me just the best thing ever. And so I always wanted to do that. I just didn't really have the tools, and I didn't really know how to. So my first like experience outside of like country music was when I was like 18, 19, I had like a rock band. And so I was on stage like shredding and like and I wasn't like singing in a like a rock and roll way, but it would be categorized as like a heavier rock kind of style. And I had a lot of people that didn't like it. But I was just open to experimenting with different things, you know? And so I put out an album that was like kind of rock stuff, and it was under the name Ruby and the Reckless. That was our name.
Okay, now it's all coming together.
Does that resonate?
I saw some of that on like YouTube.
Yeah,
and I was like, didn't make that connection.
Yes, so that was me and my band for a while that were more rock oriented.
Got it.
There was some great music that like I loved that I was able to write and release through that. But after that, I was like, okay, I'm going back to Ruby Jane, and I'm gonna really try to go the direction that I want to, which is pop. And I actually, what I credit a lot of where I am today musically is to my producer, who I met like around 3 years ago, around the time that I was really trying to hone my genre. And his name is Nate. And we met, he came on to play like keyboard in my band, just to be like a sideman keyboardist. But as we started to work together more and more, I realized that like he was a producer. And he works with Tamika. He works with a ton of artists. He's so talented. He's worked with Nash and like toured with him. I don't know if you know Nash. He's got that like, I hate you, I love you.
Yes.
That's not.
Okay.
So he's like worked on stuff for him out of LA. And he's really like grown and developed over the years. But basically like we found like a musical soulmate kind of partnership in each other. And so we started writing music together. And he really helped me hone what I wanted to do pop music wise. And so like he produced the last 2 singles, which were the first 2 singles, the first music that I've released in like 5 years, which we'll get to that and talk about that. But under the Ruby pop transformation, and those songs were produced by him. And so he really was able to listen to me and to what I wanted, and was able to make that creation with me. And so, you know, so now through that kind of transformation, now I have a lot of more of a stronger idea of the way that I want to convey the pop music that I want to make, which I would put into you know, when I say pop, it's obviously never going to be like Katy Perry, like, you know, I mean, Halsey has some darker stuff, but it's really more in that like Billie Eilish-y, Banks.
It really is.
Kind of dark pop. Mm-hmm. And that's like really where I've always wanted to get to. It's been, you know, a bit of a journey and plenty of naysayers, which there still are plenty of naysayers, but I've just always had the mindset of like, I don't give a fuck. Like I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to follow. I'm not going to make music that I don't want to make.
That's amazing. You know? And luckily for you that you have that option to do that. Cause like you said, some people get typecast and they're like afraid to leave that, or like, oh, you know, like that's what I was saying with Jonathan Tyler. He had this whole, in his world, you know, he was typed as something else and then went into more Americana. So, but that's who his true sound is. So would you say now, like, this is your most, like, the truest sound to who you are and what you want to be singing?
For sure. And I think I'll make different kinds of pop music down the road, you know, but this is the end goal that I wanted to get to for a really long time, which was pop.
Amazing. Yeah.
And so, yeah, thank you. And it's really makes me happy that I'm able to do that now. And I mean, I might release something in the future that's like super minimal pop, or something that's like super, I don't know, but pop is what I want to do. And I also love, just writing songs. So I write like a lot of songs for like other artists as well. And that's something that like I'll continue to do. Like I still enjoy writing country songs. And I have been writing like some country songs for like some people in Nashville and stuff like that. And that's something that I love doing as well. But for me, for like Ruby Jane Smith, whatever we're using.
Ruby. Calling you Ruby.
I think it will always be pop music.
Amazing. So I want to touch on something you said. You said your musical soulmate. So we have to talk about your Bachelor stints on The Bachelor.
Okay, all right.
If that's okay.
Of course.
That's something that was very unique to, obviously, like you said, that's not, there's so much more to you besides just that piece, but that's so interesting as well. So Bachelor decided to kind of do a spin-off and using artists and things like that. So how did that whole, like, you know, we don't have to go to, I think people know who the Bachelor, like what the Bachelor is and things like that, but just what was that experience and those takeaways that you kind of had from that?
Yeah. So it was such a random experience for sure. The way that it kind of came about was they reached out to me. It wasn't something that like I saw and was like, I want to be. I never imagined myself on a reality show. Of all the experiences in my life, I never pictured that being one of them, especially not The Bachelor. But they reached out to me and they were like, you know, we're doing this musical take on it, and it's going to be all musicians, all artists, singers. And at first, you know, I was like pretty hesitant. I did like the interview on the phone, and then they came out to Austin to like do some auditions here. And then they like the final one was they like flew me out to LA, and I did the final one there. And I was just kind of the whole time I was just like, I'm probably not going to get it. So like, who cares? Why not?
Yeah.
And if I do
Which is
get
typically
it,
when you get it then, because you're like,
right,
I don't really care.
Right. And I was like, well, I'll cross the bridge when I come to it if I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I did. And I actually like, I didn't end up like 100% saying yes till like about a week before we started filming. And there were, I'm not going to get 100% into all the reasons, but anyway, I said yes. Finally, I was like, screw it. Like, let's do it. YOLO.
Yeah.
YOLO.
Yeah.
But I was like, literally, like, you only live once. I might as well say yes to this experience. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like where I'm at in my life now, is just say yes, because you just never know. And so I did.
Love that. I
flew out there, and I ended up meeting like so many people that I'm still friends with today. Like, as I was saying, like a couple weeks ago, Ryan and Chris from the show flew into Austin, and Sheridan, who lives here, and we all hung out together, and like have great friendships from the show. Gabe, who I actually was coupled up with on the show, lives in Nashville. I just went and recorded a song with him a couple weeks ago. So I have like friendships, I feel like, that will last a lifetime from that show. So that would be like my biggest number one takeaway from it. Mm-hmm. But just as an experience, like as a whole, you know, I was one of the characters that came in later on the show. So they flew us out there, and like a lot of people went in night one, and they chose me for whatever reason to go in like 5 days later. So I was not one of the first people in. And I think that they thought at the time that I was going to like shake things up, but that's not who I am. Like, I was going to go in and like steal somebody's man, you know?
Oh, yeah.
That's just not that's not my way. And I think because they thought like I was very outgoing, they were like, she's going to be really bold. And so that's why they chose who they chose to come in later as the people that were going to be really bold. But I went in, and, you know, when I went in, almost everyone was coupled up already. I'm not going to like go in and insert myself. So there were a few guys that were still single, Gabe being one of them. We really connected, and he gave me his rose. And then what ended up happening was, you know, there was a lot of pressure put on us from Chris Harrison to like become a couple and like fall in love. And I think a lot of it was just a lot for him. And he also had a thing for another girl that was in there from night one. And it was, I mean, if anyone has watched the show, they'll know that part. But anyway, so he decided to leave. And so since we were in a couple, we're tied together. So if he leaves, then I have to leave.
Oh, wow.
So that's how that whole thing went down. Yeah. So he left, and then as a result, I had to leave, which was super unfortunate. But at the end of the day, like, I believe everything happens for a reason. And I don't know. I don't know that I'm cut out, that I would have been cut out to be a reality Bachelor star person. I don't know. I just don't think it's me.
I don't know. I mean, I look at you and I'm like, reality Bachelorette, like next Bachelorette.
Hey, next Bachelorette. Listen. No, I mean, but when I look back, I'm like, I think of it the most as like, A, the friendships that I made, but B, it's just a great box to check off in life. And that's just kind of like how I think of it. I'm like, well, You know, I played with Willie and I, you know, did this and that, played the Grand Ole Opry. Well, now I've been on a Bachelor show. I mean, like, it's just a part of a cool life journey. Yeah. And that's just the way that I look at it. And there's definitely like no hard feelings at all. I still like am friends with a lot of the producers of the show. There's no hard feelings. But yeah, so I would count it as a positive experience for sure.
That's awesome. So what other, like, do you have, I feel like, because like you said, you're checking off these bucket list items. What other things are on your bucket list that you love to check off?
Man, well, I mean.
Oh, wait, and you played for all 5 presidents, correct?
Oh, yeah.
See, that's another bucket list, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, like that's another bucket list item that I mean, I have a whole list of them. I can keep going, y'all. That's why I've told y'all, like, homegirl is a whole thing.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
5.
Yeah.
Remember how long she's been? Since she's been alive.
Well, it was all at once. Yeah,
okay, let's talk. Yeah. Okay, so tell us about that. Tell us about that. Still amazing.
Thank you. I was definitely losing my shit over Obama.
Well, what was the occasion that you did this?
Okay, so the occasion was I was contacted by, well, it was this was maybe 3 years ago. 2.5, 3. It was a benefit for oh my gosh, Hurricane. What was the? No. Way after that. This was
like what part of your career were you?
This was like 2-3 years ago.
Okay. Rita, I don't know.
I think it was Irene. So this was a benefit, and it was being held in San Antonio. And the musical director, a good friend of mine, Martin Gigi, he's actually a film director, but also a musician. He lives in LA. And he's the reason that I played with ZZ Top. I've known him for a long time. So he contacted me. This was again like a 3 days before thing, and was like, hey, I think we need a fiddle player for this benefit. It's all 5 living. It was everyone except Donald Trump. So it was at the time, Obama, George Bush Sr., Jr., Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton. So he was like, they're all going to be there. And actually, interestingly enough, who else was performing there was Lady Gaga. So she closed out.
Like, hey girl,
she closed out the benefit.
Yeah.
So then I ended up playing in the band for like all the artists, and then it worked out to play with her as well. And so it was just a whole thing. And it was just like, obviously, yes. I'll be there. And I met, I was able to like, they put us all in a room like right before to like, we had to do like a special walkthrough to meet all the presidents and stuff. And so we went into like this room, and they all came in, and we took a picture with them and shook all their hands, and they were all like super nice. Like obviously like George Bush Sr. and Jimmy Carter were like very quiet, they're older. But Obama was like just super sweet. That was who like I had like the biggest crush on him. Like who doesn't? But I was just like so nervous meeting him. And he was like super kind. Bill Clinton was like very outgoing. George Bush, I'm pretty sure like tried to hit on me a little bit.
Oh my God.
It was like,
I was thinking it was going to be like, somebody else in that lineup. That was the last person I would have.
Yeah, no, he was like, I'm pretty sure he said something like I came up and I was like introducing me. He was like, well, hello. He like said something like that. I was like, oh my God, that was so weird. You're like, yeah, it was hilarious. But yeah, and then like I remember like my favorite moment of that whole night was being backstage, just like in some like, I don't remember what, someone was speaking or something, and I'm just backstage with like all these people. They're all back there, and Lady Gaga and Bill Clinton are like shooting the shit and like joking around with each other and laughing, and I'm standing like 5 feet away from them, and I just like look over and see like he's got his arm around her. They're like palling around. I was like, this is the craziest. Like Lady Gaga and Bill Clinton are like shooting the shit 5 feet away from me, and I'm just standing here watching. I was just like, what is happening right now? It was amazing. And yeah, they all like all 5 of them, I remember like sat front row, and I was like so nervous. Like when it came time for me to do like my big solos and stuff like that, I was just like don't look in front of you.
Don't look at the president.
Don't look at like Obama is like looking at you, but like don't look. Yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, just another like lucky, amazing experience of just knowing really great people. That I feel like when you know certain people in the music industry and they trust you and they know that you're talented and they know that you're going to be a professional and you're going to deliver, then you're able to get like those crazy cool calls like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll add that to the list of just like fun, amazing experiences. And that's kind of like how I feel like now in life, you know, like I have a direction that I want to go in with myself musically, but for a long time, I feel like I was just like closed off to certain opportunities, not ones like that, obviously, but now I'm just like, just say yes, you know, just say yes to whatever, because at the end of the day, like, don't worry too much about like, how am I going to look if I do this, or how am I going to just, life is just about like amazing experiences. And that's tying back into the Bachelor thing, you know, because I was closed off to that for a little bit. It's just like, just say yes, because you just never know. And if anything, you can just look back at the memories and appreciate it for what it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So what are you looking forward to next? Like what's coming up for you? Because I know you got this show on Tuesday.
Yes.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I'm so excited about Tuesday. It's going to be my first live Austin public show since pre-COVID.
Wow.
So I have not played in Austin. I have played like some shows around Texas, but this is like a big one for me just because it's kind of like getting back in the Austin public live scene after all this craziness. And in that time I've released 2 singles. I'm about to release another one. And so it's kind of like the new version of my show and of my music and of like my image is now out there. And so this will be my first like hometown show since then. So everyone come.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's going to be fun. Yes, for sure.
So then you said you're playing in Houston, and then what, I mean, so are you going to start touring now, or like what's kind of on?
Yes. I would like to. Really right now, what I'm focused on is like over the course of the rest of the year, I'm probably going to release like 4 or 5 more songs. So I'm getting a lot of new music out there. I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm spending a lot of time in Nashville and working with a lot of great artists there. So I think like primarily 2021, I will do like certain fly-in dates and stuff like that, but I probably won't do like a full tour till 2022. This year is just really focused on like getting a bunch of music out and writing all like my new stuff, because as soon as like I'm doing like singles right now, but after that I want to put out like an EP. And so I want to like be working on that this year as well. So that's kind of my main focus, but I'll definitely also be performing and stuff like that.
Yeah, so Runaway is your most recent single.
Yes.
And what's the story behind that particular song?
So that song was written, both Runaway and Sick were written obviously like 2020, height of COVID. Runaway was written along with my producer, Nate. We just wrote it in the studio. And a lot of times like how we've been creating these songs is we'll be in the studio and you know, he'll come up with like a track or some excuse me, some kind of like backing track or like beat or whatever, and then I'll always like handle the lyrics and the melody, and so then I'll come up with something and pitch it to him. But the concept of Runaway, when I write music, I never out of the gate try to pigeonhole myself into being like, okay, this is what I want to write about. I try to let the lyrics and the melody kind of reveal themselves to me. And then once that's starting to happen, then I'm like, okay, I think this is where I'm going with it. So like and everyone has a different process, but some people will sit down in a writing session and they'll be like, what am I going through right now? Especially when you're co-writing with people. What are you going through right now? Like, what do we want to talk about? And I never like to do that. I'm like, it'll tell me what it wants to say.
Yeah. And Taylor Swift has that on lockdown.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to like all emotive kind of lyrics, but that's really interesting. Yeah.
For
to
sure.
let the music kind of dictate. To
yeah.
you.
And I'm very like melody first, very melody driven. So I'll come up with like a melody and then I'll honestly just start to like say things. And when like the most clear message kind of starts to come out, then I'm like, okay, I think that's what this is. And a lot of my personal life experiences, even though I don't set out to write about them, they come out. that's inevitable, right? So also like I started writing Runaway, which was about kind of a tumultuous relationship that I was in at the time. And then and I didn't intentionally start writing about that. It just came to the surface, and then the song became what it is. And so, yeah, that's just like kind of my process. But yeah, the song, I love this one. And I think it's very much in like the super pop. It's a little like, it's not quite as dark as like Sick kind of has like very dark tones to it musically. Runaway's a little even poppier, I guess. But it's just a message of being in a relationship that is not going to pan out. But what if we just like ran away together and just said like screw it to everybody else and all the problems that are holding us back. So that's kind of just the message of the song. And yeah, I'm really like happy with how it turned out for sure, and excited about it. And now like I'm prepping I've got a summer single that's going to come out in like a month and a half that I'm like really excited about. It features a good friend of mine, Ben Cena, who's another great singer and songwriter, and it's a duet. And it's the first time I've ever had another person like guest on a song of mine and sing. And I feel like all the music that I write is kind of negative lyrically. It's just how
You're
I
like
am. I
sick,
guess I get
run
it.
away.
Yeah. So, so this single is going to be called Summer Nights. But it's again about just some fucked up shit in a relationship. But
relationships
I've been
can be
through some fucked up relationships, so
that's the next podcast.
There you go. Yeah. So out it comes one way or another. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So, what's exciting? So, like you said, you got these new singles coming out. Is there anything else that you want to touch on or want to share with people that you've got?
Oh man, I feel like we touched on so much. I'm trying to think. Yeah. I mean, as I said, like this year is going to be a lot of new stuff. A lot of new music, a lot of like new image stuff. But it'll all be like, it's kind of just like the final, not the final chapter, but the final, I guess, coming together of everything that I've been working on, which is branding wise, doing the pop stuff, doing all of this music that I've been working on. For some of the songs that are going to come out later this year, I've been working on for like 3 years.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like really just pumped about that. And I'm focused on like just getting ready for the next step. And I'm hoping to be doing a lot of shows this year, like in Austin, especially, and like getting back into that. But then, yeah, just like spending a lot of time, I guess, traveling and writing, and getting as much out as I can. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else like important coming out that I
you got a lot of things.
Yeah.
If you think of something, obviously, like I said, you can always let me know.
Yeah,
but how can people find you on socials and your music?
On Instagram, I am rubymusic.official. On Twitter, I'm ruby_music. My website is rubymusic-official. I've got all the symbols. But I swear if you Google Ruby Jane, you're going to find me. Okay. Because there's no other Ruby Janes out there. But that's all my like social media stuff right now. And then, yeah, YouTube wise, Ruby Music is my channel. And yeah, you can find... I'm all over the place. I'm trying to be good about my social media.
You're good. I mean, yeah, you were doing things like before we started. So, well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
Keep talking to you. And so much fun. So I'm so excited to see your show.
Yes.
But thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.
And we will see. We'll definitely have to have you back after all these new singles come out.
For sure. I would love that. Awesome. I had so much fun.
Thank you.
So, yay.
Well, thank you guys. We'll see y'all next week.